Welcome to the presentation about AI resilience beyond compliance, leveraging diversity. Let's set the stage. AI resilience is based on standardization, sector-specific best practices and compliance, and company-specific solutions. Nature solved this gracefully. Look around and you will find that you are unique. The surprising fact, though, is you are unique like everybody else. I'll talk about how this is achieved by nature at the end of my presentation. But first, let me introduce 3 simple principles to explain how diversity can be leveraged in technology to increase AI resilience and drive the monetary aspect of business. The 3 principles are the wheel, the balance, and the unicorn. My name is Dr. Chandler Splice. I have a master in biochemistry, a PhD in technical sciences, and I publish in the field of equine genetics and AI. I'm also the co-chair of the CSA work group, AI governance and compliance, and work full-time as a consultant in the pharma industry. Now let's have a look at the agenda. The stage is set. Let's dive into the 3 principles, the wheel, the balance, and the unicorn. Let's start with the wheel. The wheel points out to not actually reinvent the wheel. It emphasizes standardization as being the prerequisite for automation. An often cited, but nevertheless excellent example is the Great Baltimore Fire in 1904. A building caught fire, and when it started to spread without control, firefighter units from other cities started to rush in. But their equipment would not fit the hydrants of Baltimore. And all they could do was standing there and watch the fire in horror. The second point regarding don't reinvent the wheel is take nothing for granted. The Mars Climate Orbiter, a little spacecraft, was lost due to a mismatch between metric units and imperial units. So something like between kilograms and pounds, miles and meters. Never take standardization for granted. Always check the details, the small print, the critical parameters, not only in the case of a spacecraft. But let's stay in aeronautics and look at the 3rd point here. Never change a running system. Unless you're a test pilot, you might find it more comforting boarding a plane that might not feature the latest technology, but has proven to do its job safely. An example here is the crash of the B-2 in 2008 due to sensor failures caused by moisture. The problem were not the sensors themselves, nor their calibration, but the missing communication to heat the sensors first before calibrating them. So don't underestimate the fundamental importance of details. The Great Baltimore Fire and the Mars Climate Orbiter emphasize the importance of technical standards. The crash of the B-2 points out the importance of adhering to procedures as well as communicating and documenting any changes within procedures. Procedures are more dynamic and also more adaptable. This is a great advantage, but also a risk. Consistent procedures in the form of policies and SOPs are very important. Standards are the best insurance for reliable, technical, and procedural foundation and the most important safety feature. Now let's move to the next of the three principles, the balance. There is a short introduction. Monetary success often is perceived as a contradiction to compliance. Compliance is perceived as hindering obstacle to financial success. Let's reframe this perception and let's explore how compliance can actually drive business when it is used to manage risks instead of checking boxes. This principle covers 3 points: the balance between safety and risk, maximizing revenue through compliance, and proactive risk management as strategy for resilience. So on the picture here, you see a scale with the representation of safety on the left-hand side and risk, chances, but also opportunities on the right-hand side. Let's look at the first bullet point. Risks are not black and white, but mostly gray, as they are a combination of severity, probability, and mitigation capacity, usually referred to as detection. A risk assessment only can represent a best guess on the overall risk, and the best guess can greatly differ between the perspectives of the business, with the focus on business continuity and revenue, the quality, with the focus on end user satisfaction, and the compliance, with the focus on regulations. The second bullet point points out that risk assessment becomes much more objective if it is seen as the simple balance between safety and risk, between safety that is perceived as an asset and risk that is perceived as a liability. Safety is about trust into the resilience of your product. Safety is not about reducing the severity to zero, nor aiming at zero probability. First, because it is unrealistic, and second, because both factors, severity and probability, depend on other external and environmental factors at the time of the incident. Therefore, safety is the mitigation capacity to maintain functionality, business continuity and revenue, quality and user satisfaction, and legal compliance. Safety in this context can be referred to as resilience. This brings us to the third bullet point. Resilience is based on proactive risk management, not on a maximum safety or zero risks. If risk is perceived as a liability, it demonstrates the potential to impact business, quality, and compliance during the whole life cycle of the product. This can result in massive financial losses. The most successful companies and richest people in the world are the ones with a strong focus on preserving their assets and avoiding the loss of money. The richest people are also the ones who are willing to take great risks. But let's see later how these seemingly contradicting behaviors will fit together. Now we continue with maximizing revenue through compliance. The left-hand side of the picture should represent compliance, and the right-hand side of the scale, speedy success. Let's start with the first bullet point, initial investments. Implementing refined process control takes time, and the time to market will be prolonged. This usually is the deal breaker from a business point of view, that is driven by short-term success and a quick return on investment. It is so common to overlook the advantage of the second bullet point, the time in market, that is prolonged, supporting additional revenue and sustainability. Some highly successful companies with long-term growth in mind heavily invest into a short time to market, but also keep a very close eye on a long time in market. Another advantage of initial investment into process control can be establishing a set of generic processes along with a set of task-specific parameters. This allows for some flexibility and adaptability of the process without a major change. Let's take the mounting of a wheel as example. The generic process for a robot could be grabbing the wheel, positioning the wheel, and mounting the wheel. The task-specific parameters could be adapted to a range of different wheel sizes and make the whole process adaptable for future changes, but it would also open the door for custom work and emergency collaboration. The third bullet point emphasizes that revenue is maximized by balancing the two concepts of time to market and time in market. This is optimized through strategic and proactive risk management. This approach additionally supports sustainability, which is gaining more and more importance. Therefore, it makes sense from a purely business-driven perspective to invest into sophisticated and proactive risk management and compliance with the ultimate goal of effective and efficient process control. The last slide in the balance principle addresses proactive risk management as a strategy for resilience. This picture shows how modern technology can be used for proactive risk management. What if risk management is used not only to mitigate a worst-case scenario, but for preparing for a worse than worst-case scenario? Basically, a worse than worst-case scenario are a worse than worst-case scenario are incidents like 9/11 in 2001 and Fukushima in 2011. Such a scenario doesn't test classic risk management, but the capacity and the ability to respond to an entirely novel situation. Working under extreme time pressure and dangerous conditions highlight the importance of proactive risk management. In critical infrastructure, for example, a major incident could affect most key players. The companies could lose millions in minutes, but it also could mean that your loved one might not get a certain needed or even life-saving drug anymore. This leads to the second bullet point. Being prepared for such a scenario is not possible, but proactive risk management includes the implementation of standardization, sector-specific best practices, and compliance with the legal requirements. Compliance and legal requirements are often seen as a burden, but they actually compare to the concept of the minimal viable product by reducing the most common risks. If best practices are implemented to facilitate a lean and efficient production system, it not only reduces risks, but it might beat the average output of competitors, and this could open the door for custom work, representing an additional stream of possible income. The third bullet point addresses collaboration during major incidents. The adaptability of processes is a critical feature in a worse than worst case scenario, as it paves the way for collaboration within an affected sector. Especially in critical industry, this is very important. In such a scenario, companies shall not be competitors anymore, but facilitate collaboration to mutually support society. Before we move on to the unicorn, the last principle, let's sum up the first two principles. Principle 1, the wheel. Don't reinvent the wheel. The standardization of equipment, interfaces, procedures, and communications are key features on the way to resilience. Principle 2, the balance. Resilience thrives where risk and safety is balanced, investments are smart and anticipated, and society needs are safeguarded. This is the foundation. Now let's explore how to discover the unicorn. Everybody wants a unicorn. Everybody wants a bestseller. Everybody wants a rising star. Every business wants a unique product. After all the standardization we just discussed, now is the time to accept the challenge and to go after the seemingly impossible. Let's dive into the first bullet point. Diversity does not only create a rising star, it is also the safety net. This especially applies to AI. It is highly important to support the development of unique applications within the same industry sector. This presents new challenges for assessing intelligent systems, but it not only drives innovation, but also trustworthiness. Second bullet point addresses uniqueness. Uniqueness is a highly dynamic process that needs to be backed up by standardization, process control, and compliance. The chances to develop a unique product increase with the maturity of the underlying processes. The final step is small. The impact, though, is big. The risk at this point is much smaller and the chances for success much bigger. Let's come back to the risk appetite of successful people and companies. The more mature the underlying processes are, the bigger is the likelihood to develop a successful product. Also, the financial loss in the case of a failure is smaller because they don't have to start all over. This can be compared to climbing to the Mount Everest. Each consecutive camp reflects process maturity, and the summit push reflects the leap into the unknown territory of innovation. Some highly innovative ideas never reach the market because the underlying processes fail, because they are pushed back to square one instead of the last base camp. So make sure your company has the required base camps for successful summit pushes. The third bullet point emphasizes the challenges of diversity. Uniqueness is based on diversity, encompassing the inclusion of different perspectives. In our current society, this is still a challenge, and not even the inclusion of color and gender diversity is granted. To implement diversity into AI, the first step is to recognize the lack of diversity in our society. The second step is to build diverse technology despite this lack. How important diversity is to nature is addressed in the next slide. While the first two principles are notoriously underestimated regarding their contribution to the business, the unicorn principle is equally underestimated regarding to its contribution to safety. different solutions have different strengths and vulnerabilities. A diverse yet interconnected landscape, it's much harder to attack, yet easier to defend in an outdoor setting as in cybersecurity. Diversity extends, not shifts, extends the mindset from a company-specific perspective to an inclusive, sector-wide perspective, where individual solutions shall be encouraged and supported. This brings us to the last topic of this presentation, nature and AI. Evolution has tested the three principles very thoroughly. First, by standardization. Evolution found a way to standardize the basics and uses for the genome the same building blocks across all species, from hamster to human, all across. That allows to test the most fundamental processes and procedures in different environments and challenges, and optimize them regardless the circumstances. This is a very profound approach. In technology, this represents standardization and compliance. Second bullet point. With epigenetics, nature found a way to transcribe genes on a group level and memorize environmental impacts for several generations. Epigenetics opens up variance and adaptability, yet staying closely connected to the standards. They can be compared to sector-specific best practices. Third bullet point. Individual protein expression ensures uniqueness. This ensures that you are unique like everybody else. Hence, diversity as a concept is highly preserved among species, and even different evolutionary approaches were developed to maintain diversity. Selection is based on how well an individual, based on its unique features, can adapt to current environment and to change, not despite the highly standardized foundation, but because of the highly standardized foundation. The last slide sums up the presentation. Standardization is the foundation to automation and efficient process control. Diversity is the result of independent innovation. It is a rising star, but also a safety net. Resilience is built on diversity in nature and intelligent systems. How can you incorporate the three principles in your daily life? Thank you for your time and participation. On the slide, you find my contact details. And if you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out. Have a great day.